What happens when the galaxy's most feared warlord meets a species he believes to be weak only to discover they've endured wars, disasters, and suffering beyond anything his kind could imagine? This isn't just a story about survival. It's about a fragile-looking species that refuses to break, no matter the cost. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show some love by giving the video a thumbs up. Now let's jump into the story. High Commander Rovik stood motionless at the edge of the command deck of the Dreadlight, the largest warship in the Drovic Dominion. His tall frame was cloaked in armor made from the bones of conquered beasts, and his gray, ridged skin shimmered slightly under the dim green lights of the bridge. Rovik had lived through 2 centuries of battle, each one etched into his body as a mark of glory. Every scar was a story, every missing scale a badge of victory. Around him, officers moved silently, knowing better than to interrupt his thoughts. Vast screen before him showed a single dot moving slowly through space, an unknown vessel. It had entered Drovic-controlled territory just hours ago, without warning and without broadcasting proper signals. Most ships that dared to cross into Dominion space ended in flames. This one didn't even have visible weapons. It moved gracefully. Like a leaf drifting across water, its surface clean and white, rounded and smooth, completely unlike the jagged, armored ships that roamed this galaxy. "Report," Rovik commanded, his voice a low growl that made even the lights seem to dim. "Sub-Commander." Fira stepped forward, data tablet in hand. "The ship identifies itself as Solace Dawn. It belongs to a species known as humans. They claim they entered our space by mistake while seeking habitable planets." "Humans?" Rovik repeated, the word strange on his tongue. "Unknown." "Yes, Commander. Our records show limited data. Their ship's technology is primitive, at least 3 tiers below ours. No heavy weaponry, weak shields, and a hull that would shatter under a single plasma burst." Rovik let out a deep, rumbling breath, the Drovic equivalent of a dismissive laugh. Another soft-skinned species wandering too far from home. He turned back to the screen, eyes narrowing. "Do they ask for mercy? They request peaceful contact, a diplomatic meeting. They say they mean no harm." "Peace," Rovik muttered, tasting the word like it was spoiled food. In the Drovic Dominion, peace was simply what existed between conquests. Still, he knew the law. First contact required an official assessment, even with weaklings. Especially with weaklings. Arrange a meeting. Not here. Not on Dreadlight. Choose neutral ground. "There's an abandoned research station orbiting the gas giant in this sector," Fira offered. "Power is minimal, but life support is active. That will do. Inform the humans we will meet them there in 12 cycles. I will bring a small escort. Select my strongest." "Of course, Commander." Rovik turned away from the screen, his mind already moving ahead. There was no thrill in crushing something that didn't fight back, but there was always the chance of the unexpected. He had seen too many species crumble from arrogance, some even his own. 12 hours later, the transport shuttle carrying Rovik and his elite guards landed softly on the surface of the old research station. The structure was rusted and hollow, built by a long-absorbed species whose name few remembered. Emergency lights flickered along the empty corridors, casting long shadows as the group moved with silent confidence. Rovik led the way, unshaken by the station's decay. Behind him walked 3 of his finest: Turek, the Blade Master; Vena, the Silent Hunter; and Morik, whose arms were stronger than most engines. Each had fought beside Rovik in countless campaigns. Each knew what it meant to dominate. They reached the central chamber, a circular room with a worn metallic table at its center. Rovik placed his hand on the control panel, activating the translation device on his chest. His guards took their positions without a word, surrounding the room with a practiced precision It spoke of years of training. And then the humans arrived. The door slid open with a tired groan, revealing 4 figures in modest blue uniforms. They looked almost fragile under the station's harsh lighting. Thin arms, soft faces, no scales or claws, no visible signs of natural defense. Rovik's first thought was how easily they would fall in combat. He was already losing interest. The tallest among them stepped forward. "I am Commander Liam Voss, captain of the colony vessel Solace Dawn. With me are Naima Torres, strategic. Advisor, John Cade, our lead field medic. And Dr. Myra Ellen, our historian." Rovik narrowed his eyes. "A historian? At a first contact meeting? Curious. I am High Commander Rovik of the Drovik Dominion," he said, letting the translator speak. In calm tones, "I have led the conquest of 12 worlds. My victories are carved into the surface of my flesh. My people do not make mistakes in battle." Voss nodded politely. "We apologize for the intrusion into your space. It was not our intention. Our star charts did not show any marked boundaries." Rovik stepped closer, towering over the humans. His guards tightened their grip on their weapons. The pressure in the room grew thick. The Dominion holds this space and 12 systems beyond. Those who enter without invitation usually do not leave. Yet here you are, standing, speaking. "We only seek peaceful exchange," Voss replied. Steadily, "We come not to conquer, but to coexist." Rovik clicked his jaw in amusement. These humans were smaller than expected, weaker, but something in their calm unsettled him. They weren't trembling. They weren't backing away. They looked ... curious. He paused, studying their eyes. Voss's gaze was steady. The woman called Naima scanned the room quickly, already analyzing their tactical disadvantage. The medic John carried a small medical scanner, pointless in combat, but his posture was alert. And the historian, Mira, had been watching Rovik since. She walked in, not with fear, but with interest. He couldn't say why, but something felt different. This was no ordinary species. "We will speak," Rovik said at last, "and you will tell me why your kind dares to travel so far from home." He gestured for them to sit. The humans obeyed. His guards did not lower their weapons. The meeting had begun, but this was no ordinary first contact. Rovik could already feel it. Something about this species was going to surprise him. He just didn't know how much. Yet asterisk, the air inside the abandoned research station felt colder. Now, metal groaned under its own weight, and the weak lighting pulsed like the heartbeat of something old and forgotten. High Commander Rovik sat at the head of the table, towering over the 4 humans seated across from him. His guards stood silently behind him, watching every movement with sharp, trained eyes. The humans didn't flinch. That unsettled Rovik more than he cared to admit. Most species would cower under such a gaze. These 4 didn't even break eye contact. Commander Liam Voss was the first to speak again. "We understand that your people are strong. You've seen many battles and won them all. But strength takes many forms, Commander." Rovik let out a quiet grunt, something between curiosity and dismissal. "Words are wind," he said. "I have heard many species boast. Most fall before the first shot is fired." Dr. Myra Ellen, the historian, leaned forward slightly. Her voice was calm, her posture relaxed. "Then allow us to show you what humans call strength. Not the strength of weapons or armor, but the strength of will." Rovik tilted his head. "Speak then, and let me decide if your stories carry weight." John Cade, the medic, spoke first. "My grandfather served in a place called the Eastern Front. It was during one of our greatest wars. Temperatures dropped, so low that soldiers' breath turned to ice. Fingers froze and shattered like glass. They had no heated suits, no protective armor. Just fabric and fire. Rovig's eyes narrowed. They fought in those conditions? They didn't just fight, Cade said. They survived. Some went weeks without proper food, drinking melted snow and eating roots or shoe leather. They buried themselves in snow to stay hidden. Some didn't sleep for days. Naima Torres nodded. In another battle, soldiers dug trenches into the earth and lived in them for months. Mud covered everything. Disease spread like fire. The skies never stopped raining shells, but they stayed. Even when death was almost certain, they held their ground. One of Rovig's guards shifted uncomfortably. Rovig noticed. He said nothing. Dr. Ellen activated a small projector. An image appeared in the air above the table, black and white footage of soldiers crawling through mud. Explosions in the distance. Smoke covering the sky. Rovig stared at the scene in silence. The visuals were simple by Drovik standards, but the raw brutality caught his attention. These were not mighty warriors in gleaming armor. They were fragile, dirty, bloodied, and still moving forward. We had no advanced tech, Myra said. We didn't evolve in fire or radiation. We made mistakes. We bled. And still, we endured. Rovig leaned back, his expression unreadable. So you live in the dirt. You suffer. That is not strength. That is desperation. Voss shook his head. Desperation doesn't keep people alive through freezing nights with nothing to eat. Desperation doesn't make someone carry their wounded comrade through enemy fire. That takes something else. Rovig looked at each of them again. He tried to see the fear behind their calm words, but there was none. Instead, there was a strange certainty in their voices, as if they had nothing to prove, yet everything to teach. Tell me another, he said. Naima spoke again, this time more quietly. My grandmother served in a desert war. The sun could burn through metal by midday. Water was rationed by the spoonful. Enemy forces would hide in the sand and strike at night. Her unit lost half its members in the first week. She paused. They didn't retreat. They adapted, covered their equipment in cloth, dug into the sand during the day, moved at night. She carried wounded soldiers across dunes with broken ribs and a shattered ankle. Rovig frowned. And your commanders allowed this? She was the commander, Naima replied. For the first time, Rovig blinked without hiding it. His head membrane shifted slightly, the Drovek version of raising an eyebrow. I see, he murmured. You place strange value on pain. Not pain, Mira corrected. Persistence. Rovig stood suddenly and walked to the window, staring out at the swirling gas giant below. Silence stretched. The humans said nothing. They waited. Rovig finally spoke, his voice lower, thoughtful. Most species we meet fight for survival. They resist, then break. Those that fight well, we respect. Those that fight poorly, we remove. But your kind fights with broken bones, without weapons, in hopeless conditions. He turned to face them again. Why? Voss answered without hesitation. Because when the end comes, we'd rather stand than kneel. Because our strength isn't only in what we can destroy, it's in what we refuse to give up on. Rovig stared at him. He believed him. He didn't want to, but he did. Another pause. Then Rovig spoke again, quieter this time. You say strength comes in many forms. Perhaps I have more to learn before judgment. As the humans nodded, Dr. Ellen turned off her projector. The last image had been of a cratered city, its buildings gone, its streets empty, but a small figure standing upright in the rubble. Rovig returned to his seat. He said nothing more. But for the first time in many years, he was no longer certain. He held the stronger position in the room. The room felt heavier now. High Commander Rovig had not moved in minutes. His large hands rested on the edge of the table, claws tapping the metal slowly, a rhythm that betrayed the thoughts spinning in his mind. Across from him, the humans waited patiently. They had not raised their voices, never once tried to impress with threats or power. Yet somehow they had changed the mood of the entire meeting. Rovik had started this encounter as a conqueror. Now he was no longer certain what these humans truly were. Dr. Myra Ellen leaned forward again, her voice still soft but firm. "We've told you how we survive with little food, without proper shelter or protection. But I think you're beginning to understand that what matters more is how we keep going when everything is already lost." Rovek looked at her without speaking. She continued, "There were battles in our past where soldiers were surrounded, cut off from all supply lines. Many didn't survive, but some did. They lived by crawling through forests, hiding in caves, eating anything they could find, moss, insects, even tree bark. And not because they were ordered to, but because they refused to surrender." Rove's head turned slightly, watching each of them again. "That is not survival," he said slowly. "That is obsession," Commander Liam Voss responded gently. "It's called duty. Sometimes we do what seems impossible because we feel we must. Not for ourselves, but for others." Rovik looked away. He remembered his own training, how the Drovik taught warriors to embrace pain only when it brought victory. But these humans seemed to carry pain with them, like a tool they knew how to use. He frowned. "But pain breaks the body. Wounds destroy a warrior's ability to fight." Naima Torres shook her head. "Not always. Some keep going even after being hit. In one conflict, a soldier lost an arm to an explosion. He tied off the wound and finished the mission with his other hand. In another, a pilot with a shattered leg flew his plane for hours, refusing to eject until he guided it to safety. These aren't rare stories, Commander. They're common." Rovik shifted, uncomfortable. "Your people seem to celebrate suffering." "We don't celebrate it," said John Cade, the medic. "But we learn from it. Pain teaches. Loss teaches. We grow stronger when we survive things we never thought we could." Rovik stood again, pacing now. The metal floor creaked under his boots. His voice had lost its arrogant edge. "You fight even when the fight cannot be won?" "Yes," Voss replied. "Because sometimes the goal isn't victory. Sometimes it's to hold the line, to protect others, or to leave a message behind." Dr. Ellen activated the projector again. This time, it showed a snowy city covered in ruins. "This is Lurigrad," she said. "It was surrounded by enemy forces for nearly 900 days. Food ran out. Temperatures dropped to 30 below zero. Families boiled leather to eat. People burned books to stay warm. But the city never surrendered." Rovik stared at the image, saying nothing. His expression had changed. His sharp features were now drawn with something like disbelief. "You have no shields, no biological defenses, no superweapons. And yet you did not fall?" "No," said Myra. "We stood. And we still stand." Rovik stopped pacing. "What about your wounded? How do they return to fight?" Cade answered, "We use prosthetics, artificial limbs. Today, some even use robotic arms and legs, controlled by their minds. But even before that, people returned to battle with wooden legs or hooks for hands. If they couldn't fight, they supported the ones who could." The commander's head membrane flattened, a clear sign of internal conflict. He had lived through hundreds of battles. He had seen species with claws like razors, armor like stone, and minds that could melt steel. But none had spoken like this. None had shown this strange fire. "You fight without logic," he said finally. No commander would accept such losses. Voss looked him in the eye. "Then we are not like other species. We've had battles where 90% of a unit was lost, but the mission was completed. We've had soldiers continue fighting after being blinded, deafened, burned. And not because they were ordered to, because they chose to. Rovik sat back down, slower this time. The weight of their words settled deep into his chest. Why? He asked, quieter than ever before. Why would someone choose to continue through pain, through hopeless odds? Naima responded. For each other. In combat, a soldier may begin a mission for country or command, but in the worst moments, they fight for the person next to them. It becomes personal. No one wants to be the reason their team doesn't make it home. There was a long silence. Rovik looked down at his own scarred hands. He remembered battles where he had ordered retreat at the first sign of heavy losses. It had always been logical, efficient, but he'd never considered what it might mean. To push beyond those limits, finally he looked up. You surprise me. I expected fear, weakness. Instead, you show scars I cannot see, wounds that still bleed, and yet you stand. Myra nodded slowly. That's what makes us human, Commander. We don't break the way others do. For the first time since the meeting began, Rovik dismissed his guards with a single wave. They hesitated, but obeyed, exiting quietly. The room grew still. He looked at the humans again, not with dominance, but with curiosity. Then teach me, Rovik said. Show me how a species so fragile became something even I do not fully understand. The humans exchanged brief glances. They had expected skepticism, even mockery, but not this. Not an invitation. Voss gave a small smile. All right, Commander. Let us tell you how we learned to endure the impossible. Asterisk, the final meeting began. Without the usual signs of formality. High Commander Rovik was already seated in the center chamber of the station when the humans arrived. There were no guards beside him, no weapons on his belt. The ceremonial blade he had worn since the first. They now lay flat on the table in front of him, untouched. When Commander Liam Voss and his team entered, they immediately noticed the difference. The room was quieter. Rovik's posture was less rigid. The air, once heavy with tension, now felt strangely calm. Welcome, Rovik said simply. His voice, usually deep and commanding, carried a softer tone. The humans took their seats. No one reached for a weapon. No one needed to. Something between them had changed. I've spoken with my superiors, Rovik continued. I shared your stories, your history, your examples of survival. They were not what we expected. Voss nodded slowly. I imagine they raised concerns. Rovik didn't smile, but his jaw twitched, as if the idea of humor was trying to form in his expression. They did, but not the kind you may think. Your people were judged not by your weapons or your numbers, but by your nature. And what we saw disturbed us. Double quotes. Dr. Myra Ellen leaned forward. Disturbed? Rovik nodded. You are not built for war the way we are, and yet you fight. Not only that, you persist. Through pain, through chaos, through devastation. You push forward when any logical being would stop. That, to us, is more dangerous than firepower. He slid a small device across the table. It displayed a holographic document in the human's language. This is a non-aggression pact, he said. It includes mapped borders between our territories, trade agreements, and communication protocols. We wish to avoid conflict with your species, not out of fear, but out of respect. Voss picked up the device, scanning its contents. This is very different from your initial proposal. Rovik looked directly at him. Yes, because I am. No longer speaking to a species I see as inferior. You've changed my understanding of what strength looks like. Naima Torres studied the commander closely. That's not an easy thing to admit. Rovik gave a slight nod. It is not. But I have never feared truth. There was a pause as the humans took in the moment. The alien warrior who once saw them as an inconvenience now spoke like an ally. But it wasn't just policy that had shifted, it was perspective. Something deeper had changed within Rovik himself. "What made your leadership change their mind?" Mira asked. Rovik stood and turned toward the viewport, the massive gas giant still swirling silently outside. "Because they began asking the same question I did. What happens if we try to conquer a species that doesn't know when to give up? What happens when the fight doesn't end, even after victory?" He turned back around, his face serious. "There are species we've defeated who resist for a few weeks, some for months, but humans, your kind could fight for generations. Not because of orders, but because of something you carry in your hearts. You'd resist even when it no longer made sense to resist." John Cade, the medic, spoke for the first time since arriving. "It's not about logic. It's about meaning. We hold on to things, ideas, people, places even when everything else is falling apart. Sometimes that's what keeps us going." Rovik walked slowly back to the table. "Your people survive things that would break most others. But that's not what makes you dangerous. What makes you dangerous is that survival isn't your goal. It's just the beginning. You don't want to live through something. You want to build something after." There was silence again. A deep, thoughtful silence. Then Voss asked the question that had been on everyone's mind. "What do you really think of humanity, Commander, now that you've seen us?" Rovik picked up his blade, turned it once in his hand, and then set it gently back down. "I think you are a species, forged by struggle, not made to dominate, but made never to surrender. And that makes you the most unpredictable force we've encountered." He paused, his eyes steady. "You're not built to break. And that's why we want peace." The humans exchanged quiet glances, the weight of the moment sinking in. "We'll transmit these terms to Earth," Voss said. "Our leaders will decide, but personally, I believe we can work with this." Rovik nodded. "Good. The Drovik Dominion will hold our position at the edge of your space, not as a threat, as a signal of trust." As the humans rose to leave, Rovik approached Voss one last time. His voice lowered, almost hesitant. "May I ask one more question?" Voss turned. "Of course. If your colony ship had been attacked, if your people faced extinction, would you really have fought to the last?" Voss didn't hesitate. "Yes, we would have tried peace. But if peace failed, we wouldn't go quietly. We never do." Rovik's eyes stayed on him for a moment longer, then gave the slightest bow. "Then I'm glad we talked first." As the human shuttle pulled away from the station, the alien commander remained at the viewport, watching until the ship became a speck in the distance. He didn't speak, but in his mind, he was rewriting everything he thought he knew. Later, in his private report to his leaders, Rovik wrote only one line beneath all the official observations. "Humanity is not the most powerful species we have. But they may be the one we must never underestimate." He stared out into the stars, and for the first time in his long career, felt relieved that war had not been necessary.